The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the House of Representatives and our nation's capital, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to connect you with Dave Brat, representing District 7 in Virginia. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Woody. Great to be on.
Well, you're not quite a freshman.
That's right.
Because you won a primary, the incumbent retired or resigned, and you then won the general election thereafter.
Yep, that's right. So I came in about a month and a half early and then started this January for the full term.
Well, tell us how your experience has been here so far.
Oh, it's been great. In fact, everybody kind of asks you, what's the one thing you didn't anticipate? And so I tell people, I said, it's not like House of Cards at all. Right? I mean, it's everybody up here has welcomed me graciously, both sides of the aisle. I work out in the weight room in the morning. Everyone's friendly. Everybody gives you counsel, and it's well-intentioned, good counsel on the floor to help you out as a freshman. And so that's a good, it's been great in that way. And when it gets to voting time, then there's a little more tension. But personally, it's been great.
Tell us a little bit about your district and your committee assignments.
Yep. So my committee assignments match up pretty well with my background, and I went to Princeton Seminary and did a PhD in economics. So I combined economics and ethics for about the past 30 years of my life. And so my committee assignments are first and foremost the Budget Committee. And so I'm happy with the work we've done on that. We have great chairman, Tom Price from Georgia, so that's great. And then I'm on education and workforce. I was in higher ed for 18 years, and I worked for Senator Stosh in the state House in Virginia. He's a senator for years, helping on education policy and helping kids get scholarships and that kind of thing in K-12. So I've got pretty good familiarity there. And then I'm also on small business as well. And so that also lines up pretty well with my district. My district goes all the way from Culpeper down through, Henrico, Hanover, Chesterfield, all the way over through New Kent, little piece of Richmond City. And so it's basically just 2 hours, straight south of the Capitol on 95. And so we've got rural, and then we've got, big city business, a lot of suburban business. And so, but most of it's kind of small business, and so my work on that committee is relevant. And then the Budget Committee is relevant to everything. I'm sure we're going to unpack some of those numbers coming up, but it's a good fit.
Before we proceed, I want to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can contact you.
Oh, good. And so folks may not know there's an official side and a campaign side, and so contact me in this role on the official side at the, we have a web page and Facebook and Twitter, and follow me on all that.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about your district, some more of the demographics,
Yep.
Military installations, the impact of sequestration, and those kinds of things that you are very familiar with.
Yeah, well, I mean, heavy agriculture through several of my counties, disproportionately high military concentration of folks and veterans. McGuire Woods Veteran Hospital, south side of Richmond. And so good friends in the military. Paul Galante is one of the better known names. He's a national hero. And so, sequestration, and so, I mean, I'll just dive into the issues because I ran on the debt and deficit issue, so everyone go out to the debt clock and, they can check out the 18 trillion number.
I think that's on your website.
That's
right?
on, oh yeah, that's guaranteed there. And so, I've been giving talks, for 18 years. I taught college kids, and so we're dumping the debt on them. That's the piece that's always left out. So everyone says, hey, Dave, just go up and compromise and just legislate and govern like it's some simple thing. And too often what that means, when we go up there and govern, means just say yes, yes, yes. Well, that's what we've been doing. And so we're 18 trillion in debt on that model. I don't think it's the right model. We just had a financial crisis in 07, 08. And most people think the deficits are going down, and they would be correct. They used to be about $1 trillion. Now they're about 500 billion per year.
500 billion
500 per year. And so it's still huge. And they're going back up. So if you go out to CBO, Congressional Budget Office, they're forecasting back up to $1 trillion per year, adding on to the debt by 2025. So going from, 500 billion up to $1 trillion again. And so we're moving in the wrong direction over the next 8 or 9 years. And then at the bottom of the debt clock is the bigger number. So the debt is significant, and the red light should be blinking. But at the bottom is 127 trillion in unfunded liabilities. And so those are, the big programs: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Bush prescription drug plan, and interest. If you throw those 5 things together, those 5 items will take up all federal revenues by 2032.
All federal revenues.
All federal revenues. And that's a shocker. No one knows that. So in 2032, when you say sequestration is a serious issue for the military, it is. But it pales. It's a teaspoon-sized problem in comparison with the one I just said. In 2032, under law, there will be no revenues left for the military, education, transportation, health, etc., unless we reform those systems. And so that's the one I'm messaging on. I'm trying to explain that to folks. There are some common sense fixes, but you got to get together because they're politically hot. With Democrats and Republicans have to get together on that. That's where we need a compromise. And if we don't, we won't have any money left for running government unless you're going to deficit finance, right? To fund the rest of government, everything would have to be in deficit to fund it. And so most people aren't aware of that challenge. And that's called the those are the auto pay programs. And I'm on the budget committee. So right now, 2/3 of the budget is auto pay. You can't touch it. We can only deal with 1/3, which is discretionary. So by 2032, 100% will be auto pay. Can't touch it. And so we won't have any work to do. So it's a strange setup.
Let's step back for a minute because I know your background and training is in economics.
Yep.
Give us an idea of what your philosophy is in terms of economics as it applies to public policy.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great question. I always tell people, just in shorthand, you can predict my vote. Some folks whip me up here, to get twist your arm, and they say, "How are you voting? What are you voting?" Like, I said, "Well, it's no mystery." I said, "You can look back at every vote I've taken and go back to the father of economics, Adam Smith, 1776, Scottish moral philosopher coming out of the Presbyterian tradition, and that's my background as well. And then the second guy is James Madison, who went to Princeton College in New Jersey and studied Hebrew when he was done with college, and so roughly Princeton Seminary as well. And you put those 2 guys together, and you can predict every one of the votes I've taken in the past and what I'll take in the future. So basically, it's just free market economics, and not purist, right? You need a government, and the Constitution lays out there's 18 enumerated powers for the federal government, and the rest of the power should remain with the states and the localities. So when it comes to education policy or whatever, I don't think our nation is performing well at all. When you compare and contrast us, I did research papers on that for 18 years at Randolph-Macon, and we're getting worse and worse and worse in comparison with the rest of the world. And so I think we need to return some of the power and the funding back down to the teachers and the local level, and quit making so many decisions up here at the federal level. And that applies to a lot of issues. I was just, we had a town hall last night in Louisa. They're very concerned about EPA over-regulation. So we all want clean water. There's no debate on that. But right now they're making the farmers fence in every single bass pond, every creek. It's cost prohibitive. Some of my cities have $200 million bills coming due if the 16 EPA regs kick in, just on water, just on water regs. And so we just went over issue after issue after issue. And so I think we need to get back to using the free market system. And the easiest way to see that, the powerful effects, when I started teaching economics 20 years ago, India and China, that's about 2.5 billion people on the planet, we're still making somewhere back around $1,000 a year per person to live on. And so now China's up to about $10,000 per year per person. Well, that's because they're moving toward the free market system and away from the central top-down planning. And so if you want to talk about an increase in human welfare, right, there's nothing you can compare to that in the history of human civilization. Lifting 2.5 billion people from basically poverty, subsistence levels, up to a reasonable standard of living, and they're going to keep going up. And so at the same time they're moving toward free markets, the U.S. is regulating itself out of business. And so I want to kind of reverse the direction. We're just adding layers and Dodd-Frank and the EPA and the IRS and our tax system, and it's just all thousands and thousands of pages. And so my philosophy is to get back to that entrepreneurial spirit. We got to get these kids studying, knowing what a business is in school. They don't know what I've talked to every high school in the area about, and I say, hey, raise your hand if you know what a business is. So half of them go like this. They're kind of shy. And I say, well, now raise your hand real high, and I'm going to ask you questions about a business. And every hand goes down. And so we got to do better, right? Over half those kids aren't going to go to college. So the next year, they're going to be in business or not have a job, and they don't know what business is. So my job is legislation and being a congressman, but I do take the messaging pretty seriously, trying to help the kids to really do well in their future. And by doing that, I think they'll help the economy, and they'll make my job on the budget committee easier.
Another part of the calculus, you mentioned Thomas Jefferson, and there was this debate that still ensues today between the Jeffersonians and the Hamiltonians. Of course, we've got this debate about the role of the Federal Reserve. I'm sure you have some thoughts about that as well. Yeah, well, there are a lot of smart people. I'll just give you a story that sums it up. I won't name any names, but I've talked to Fed people now, and I think they goofed up in 03, 04. I think it's fairly well acknowledged they printed too much money and created a little froth, too much money floating around that went into the housing market, along with Fannie and Freddie, and there are a bunch of other, giving liar loans to folks who have no income stream. And you put all that together, and you get disaster. And so when it comes to the Fed, I think it's good for everyone to have an audit, right? So it's not a vindictive thing. These are very high-powered minds. They're all PhDs in economics, and they work hard. But I get audited every 2 years. It's called an election, right? And so these guys are fundamental. And so sometimes they'll say, well, what can we do for you? And I say, well, you're the smartest guys in the room on economics. Give me an answer. What caused the financial crisis? And then you learn how politicized the world is. People are all hiding under their desk. No one wants to answer that question. We just had a crisis. A lot of grandma and grandpas lost half of their stock market gains. And then they don't, some folks don't know to keep your money in, and they're scared, and so they sell out at the bottom and lost half their retirement. Boom. And so when you have an error of that magnitude, we need to know who's responsible, who goofed up. And not many folks went to jail, not much responsibility for the biggest mess up in decades. And so when it comes to the Fed, I expect them to stand tall. I got to take hard votes that expose me to risk every day. Well, I want them to do the same thing. Hey, you tell the truth. We'll back you up. You tell the truth, and you can footnote it and explain, all the caveats, but give us the story so we can help support each other. Thus the need for a balanced budget amendment to deal with all of these issues? Oh, yeah. So thanks for bringing that up. So I put in a balanced budget amendment just to, it's the least restrictive account because it has to be bipartisan. So we have to have it passed across the aisle. So I put in a one-page bill, and the only thing it requires is that we balance within 10 years. So how you do it, we can negotiate out. If there's extreme circumstances, you have a military incursion and you need funding, you have a natural disaster, you need money, you can run deficit that year, but by the 10th year, we got to get to balance just for 1 year, right? So that's just to balance the budget once in 10 years. If we do that, we still haven't paid off $1 of debt that we've built up in all the past years. And so this is just a minimal ask, but it's up here. It's a heavy lift. So I'm going to go, kind of incrementally and ask Democrat friends, Republican friends, and go back and forth and try to build up the numbers and get that going. So that's a resolution that would have to pass the House and the Senate before it went to the states. Right, that's right. Is that the way it works? Yep, okay. That's right. And when was the last time we came close to anything in terms of passing a balanced budget amendment? I don't think any have been too close. They'll get 100 or 200 votes, but maybe not even 200. But this one is, as I say, it's the least restrictive. So I did it intentionally with the hopes of passage. So it's one page,
And, you know, if you put a poison pill on it on the Democrat side or the Republican side to make yourself look good and posture politically, then it, you know, you can win your side, but you won't solve the problem. So I really am trying to solve the problem on this one. We'll see.
Now, how many other members have proposals like yours in the hopper, so to speak? If you know?
I think there's probably two or three other bills that are balanced budget amendments. They're all good. So I'm just offering the least restrictive, and so we'll just see which can garner the most votes. And I'll probably vote for all the rest of them too. Right.
So if it became a constitutional requirement, then we'll still leave it up to the Congress to plug in the details, so to speak.
Right. Yep.
Talk to us about one of your other favorite subjects. Some people call it the Affordable Care Act. Some people call it Obamacare.
Right. Whew, that's a doozy. In 2 minutes, right?
You got plenty of time.
It's a biggie. I mean, the Republicans all run against it 100%. And then, you know, now we're in charge, and the Supreme Court this summer is, I think, likely on the plain reading of the text, there's some serious issues with these state exchanges and the provision of subsidies. And so I think the Supreme Court's going to overturn it. And President Obama last night on the news made it, you know, kind of went at the justices. I've never seen anything like that. And so...
Yeah, that's the provision. The language says state exchanges.
Right.
And those are the ones that would qualify for the subsidy.
Right.
So those states that don't have state exchanges, for example, Virginia would... Of course, Virginia hasn't expanded Medicaid in the first place.
And so the states that don't have the exchanges have been receiving subsidies, and that would come to an end. And so the thought is that probably breaks up Obamacare as a system, as a coherent system. And so that's a serious issue. The more serious issue, and the Democrats are acknowledging it right now. They passed it, right, with no Republican votes. None in the House, Senate, whatever. So it wasn't bipartisan. And that's the danger when you don't do it bipartisan, is you end up with some mistakes. But now the bill came in the mail last year, so everyone saw their rates up, you know, 30, 40%. That's the common. I mean, there are letters you can ask anybody. So that's, the constituents are all reporting much higher costs, price tag, when they get the check in the mail. But now they're seeing the even more difficult aspect. They got a $5,000 deductible on average is the common story that everyone, and the average person, right, the lower middle income to middle income, they do not have $5,000 for a deductible. And so that's why the Obama promise, if you have your health insurance, you can keep it. You have your doctor, you can keep it. Well, that's not the case. Now you've got to buy into a product that some of these folks can't afford. So we'll try to fix it. Milton Friedman, one of my favorite economists, just said a long time ago, the best way to help the poor is to give them cash. And I'm a believer in that. On education, health care, just add up all what the federal government is providing and running. Take that number, you divide that number up, and give it to individuals in the form of a check. And I think they'll be smiling from ear to ear, right? Instead of the federal government running all these programs, block grant it down to the states, give individuals a check, pay for your education, your health care, your HSA. You got HSA left at the end of your life, you can give it to your grandkids.
Health savings account.
Yeah, health savings account, right. And you can leave it, right? So we got huge end-of-life issues coming up. People, the average lifespan used to be 65, now it's 83.
And many of those people will suffer from Alzheimer's.
Right, and there's going to be, right? I mean, just you put it this way: you don't want politicians making that decision for you, right? We shouldn't be in the middle of that. So you make those very hard decisions. If you want the procedure, you got your HSA, your health savings account. If you can forego it, you can give that money to your grandkid. I mean, there's the balance you want, right? I mean, you're doing ethics in your head. How much do I need that procedure versus the next generation? And the social contract always used to be, you know, for the next generation. And right for the first time, it appears we're just leaving the next generation out to dry. It's unbelievable.
That's why it's important for the younger generation to get more involved, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I taught it, and I was one of them. Not that long. I guess it was a pretty long time ago. And so I encourage it, but it's rough, and I always challenge them. I say, there's a great job up here. They're the only group that doesn't have a lobbyist up here. Right? You can make a ton of money. You can make $100,000. You have every kid in the country send you $10. Set up a lobbyist like AARP does for seniors. That's good work. So you're supporting your... But James Madison, my guy, right, wrote the Constitution. He said this country is about having a large number of factions competing against each other. Well, guess what faction isn't at the debate? The kids. So guess what we've learned to do? Put the debt on that on their generation. So they need some representation up here. I'm trying to do it for them, but it's going to require a couple hundred of us.
How difficult is it to get the to get the ear of your colleagues on these issues?
It's difficult. I mean, it's not personal or anything against the guy. It's just every day is just a whirlwind up here. I mean, you've just got issue, 10 amendment votes every day. You got to be reading through those and studying them. Huge bills coming down the pike. And then a lot of members are on multiple committees doing their homework. They're chairing committees, subcommittee chair. And so that's what makes it tough. And so too often you get stuck in the noise machine instead of going up to the 30,000-foot level and saying, hey, what's the most important stuff? In my mind, the military, protecting the country, taking care of the veterans, right? The VA system is, for me, unconscionable. That just, take the guys and women who have served this country. Oh, my word, we owe them a debt. And so that, and then after that, the next generation, preparing them and equipping them they're going to be the economy.
And we talked earlier about some of the inconsistencies in policy in terms of the budget. The day after the budget resolution passed, you were hit with this doc fix. Talk to us about what that doc fix was.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm for the doc fix, and I called all my doctors and said, hey, I'm for it, but I just found out it's not paid for.
These are doctors who get reimbursed from Medicare,
and that's the issue, and it's called the doc fix because every year for the past 17 years we fixed it. We didn't really fix the policy way back when, 20 years ago, in a good way. So we always have this doc fix where you have to fill in the hole. Otherwise, the doctors will get compensated, 70 cents on the dollar. So we fix it every year to get them $1 on a dollar. And even that, they're not getting loaded on off of the Medicare payments. And so that's the issue. Well, it came up this year. It was a 10-year fix, $200 billion, and $140 billion was not paid for. Well, that's fancy lingo for we're putting $140 billion on the kids. No one will ever say it that way, right? If you say your vote is $140 billion is on the debt of your grandkids. That's what we should say on every bill where we do this. And then the polling would change in an instant. And so I couldn't vote for it. I called the doctors. I said, look, I'm for the doc fix, but we got to find the pay for, right? We got to pay for this. Find it somewhere else. I want to do right by you guys. They deserve a permanent fix. But, I mean, the irony, that was the day after we passed a budget that balances on the Republican side in 10 years. And so we were proud of that. Prior to the Democrat past 5 years, I don't think they produced a budget in the Senate for 4 of the 5 last years. So we're proud of it. We produced a budget, House, Senate, balances in 5 years, but then the next day we do that. So that hurt my brain a little bit.
Right, I can imagine so. Talk to us about your commitment in terms of term limits. I think you've limited yourself to 6 terms, is it?
Yep, 12 years, however you slice it. So if if you did the Senate term, 3 in the House, 1 in the Senate, however it adds up. But I've just been watching, politics for a long time, and the incentives, economics is all about studying incentives. And so the incentives up here are to stay, and it doesn't take a genius. Our Virginia school economist, James Buchanan, won a Nobel Prize, and I talked to him. He just passed away last year. But he said, I won a Nobel Prize for saying common sense. And so politicians, government workers are no different than private sector. Everybody wants to maximize their happiness, right? So consumers buy a Coca-Cola. Business people make profits. Government people want more people working underneath them, and then their pay goes up. And they want more tax revenue to pay for the programs that they're running. And so it's just self-interest, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's unchecked, it just grows and grows and grows. And so the private sector has to be checked. They're checked largely by competition. The government doesn't have any competition, so they're a monopoly. And on the political side, politicians want their self-interest. They want to stay in office forever. And so one of the best ways to take out that, up here, there's huge PAC money in K Street and Wall Street and all this kind of stuff, and labor union money. that helps to get you reelected if you vote their way. And the longer you're up here, the more comfortable it gets because you make all these relationships. And so I think 12 years is kind of there's no perfect number, but that helps to break it up. Go home, let someone else, and then if you want to run again and come back up as a rookie, as a freshman again, then that's good. But not having built up all those tentacles and connections and power relations, break it up every once in a while. And I think that that's the founder's logic. They did not want that accumulation of power up in one city.
You mentioned taxes, and I know that's another subject that you have pursued some fixes in terms of a flat national tax.
Yep.
Talk to us about that. Give us a little detail around that.
Yep. Well, so there's the simplest story is we have about $1.5 trillion overseas, and we have firms leaving. And the other day I got to meet a famous beer producer, and he informed me that the biggest beer firms in the world that you'd know that seem all American are no longer based in America. There's a 15 to 20% tax advantage to go to Ireland or the rest of the world. And all the investment bankers will tell you, you're crazy to be in this country.
And I think Anheuser-Busch is now owned by a foreign entity.
And that's what I was getting at, right? So that the biggie is not here. And so these are called inversions. Everyone's leaving the U.S. and going over there, and so Americans are having a hard time finding jobs. This is one of the reasons. And it's linked to our tax system. So our corporate rate is too high. It's 35. It's the highest nominal rate in the world, and it's 39 when you add in the state part. So we need to bring that down, by at least probably 10%. But if you do that, then that's the C corps, right? So those are the big corporations. Well, if you do that, then you got to lower the rate on the S corps, the small business people that own their business and their income flows through to their personal income tax statement. If you don't do that, it's not fair. Well, then, if you lower the S corp, then the average person says, well, you just lowered the rates on the C corps and the S corps and the capitalists, and I'm all for the capitalists. But, hey, what about me? And that's fair. So then we need to do comprehensive tax reform. And so really what you're doing is you're talking about a flatter, fairer tax if you're just following this logic. And so I'm in favor of either a flat tax on the income side or a fair tax on the sales tax side. And you test it for the poor. You don't want them to have to pay sales tax on food and the necessities like that. So you'd have some system for that. But the big rub comes, when you get down into the home mortgage deduction and the charitable giving deductions, and there's some biggies there that you're going to meet some real tension. And so to get that passed, you got to overcome a few big hurdles.
Great. We're going to leave it at that. Our guest has been Dave Brat, Congressman from District 7 in Virginia. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. Till next time, I'm Woody Evans.